You're listening to episode 575 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is entitled, The Resurrection Changes Everything, given on the 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2016. The background of today's story and the events that occurred some 200 years before Jesus are accounted in the book of Maccabees that we heard from today. They are connected with the gospel. They both revolve around the resurrection of the dead. That belief that there is life after this one. Think about this one question. If you truly believed that there was life after this one, what would you do different? If there was a resurrection from the dead and you truly believed it, how would you behave and live in this world differently? Now, in the book of Maccabees, there's a lot that's taken out to just give us this basic story. I want to encourage you to look up the second book of Maccabees. I think it's chapter 7. What's happening is one of the puppets of the government was trying to Hellenize or Greekize the people by suppressing any kind of culture or religious beliefs that were different than their own. The perpetrator of this particular event is Antiochus IV, let's see if I get this last name right, Epiphanes. His army was coming in to suppress, especially the Jews. They came into Israel. They took over the temple. They desecrated the temple. We hear that they were trying to suppress, in fact, in the story, to have this family eat pork. All these are part of the Jewish sensibilities of holiness and their faith, culturally and religiously. This was an invading power. And you might say, what we have a common now word for it is ethnic cleansing. And sometimes we look at these things and go, oh, that happened so long ago. But ethnic cleansing has happened to the Jews since then, in modern times, in Germany, and in Poland. Christians and other believers have been the target of ethnic cleansing in the Middle East. Catholics is particularly in Mexico. And all have attempted to suppress these people, and all have failed. And why? Because these are people who believe that there is life after this life. Today, as we listen to these readings, we might think, oh, these people, these martyrs, those were a long time ago. The people in the gospel we hear, the Sadducees, did not believe in a resurrection. I find it, just on a human level, I scratch my head and I go, really? You want to support that after you die, there's nothing? It would even seem like it would be better to make up that there was something. They were willing to argue with Jesus that there was nothing. There is no resurrection after the dead. Jesus came from a Pharisaic tradition that believed in angels, a fuller sense of the scripture, and the resurrection of the dead. This, by the way, this text also that we have in the gospel has been used to help us understand that marriage is until death do you part. That's a hard one for people to think, we'll be married forever. No. Till death do you part. We will be in heaven together is the hope, in one communion of saints, knowing God as God is to be known and knowing each other. So these stories we hear are a counterpoint I'd like to offer for our culture, a culture that is dominantly secular. Here's some data, just in our area. When looking at the religious affiliations that are about, there's a group called the nuns, not like nuns with habits, but ones that affiliate and say, we are nothing. We affiliate with no religion. Some call these folks the new atheists. Some are evangelical about their atheism. They make up 74% of our culture here in Southern Oregon. Nationwide, this group has tripled in the last decade. They're not real big in our country, but in our area, they loom large. And as Catholics, we make up only 4.7% of the population. So while the Northwest is very unchurched, we are like the king of that, of the unchurched. And it's not that these people that are nuns had never had any religious affiliation. For after Catholicism, which is the single largest group, come the formerly practicing Catholic. And then it goes on from there. And those are national statistics. But often we will get bombarded by things and arguments for the non-existence of God. Richard Dawkins is one of those individuals who's made a living out of this. He likes to mock Judeo-Christian believers, people that believe in God. And he qualifies God as the flying spaghetti monster in the sky. The problem is that's a straw man argument. We don't believe in a spaghetti monster in the sky either. So we agree. His understanding of God is not what God is. In fact, God is by definition. Not another creature, not another part of creation. God is supernatural, beyond nature. But we struggle to try to come against this. In our milieu, we used to be able to just, we're Christians. And then we'd be at least given some respect. But today, that is not the case. Today, in our world, Christians are being martyred. Just go back to last year in February, where ISIS had kidnapped 21 Coptic Christians. And each one was asked to recant their belief. And one by one, they did not renounce their faith, and they were beheaded. This was on the news. They were dressed in orange to mock the Islamic persons in Guantanamo. They hoped that they would be, their blood would be spilled into the sea where Osama bin Laden's blood was spilled, or where he was buried, I should say. That's modern times. That's just a little over a year ago. If you go back into the 20s, in Mexico, the Mexican government was adamant about destroying the Catholic Church, flat out. Priests are being killed, nuns are being killed, and anyone affiliated with them were being dispersed. It was ethnic cleansing. If you had anything that was Catholic in culture, you were a target. Interestingly enough, just weeks ago, Pope Francis canonized one of these individuals who was part of this Cristero movement that was trying to come against this oppression by the government. Sanchez del Rio is his name. He was a 14-year-old boy who didn't take up arms but was supporting the Cristeros. He was captured and tortured. They lacerated his feet and then forced him to walk all the way to a grave site where they told him, this is where you will be buried. He was asked once more to renounce his faith. They shot him, but not mortally. His response was, Viva Cristo Rey, and Viva Nuestro Señor Guadalupe, proclaiming Christ as King, and long live Our Lady, Mary. From thence they killed him. What motivates all these people, and there's so many throughout the centuries, and they're happening today, it could be you. It could be me. And it may not be with a knife. It could be with words. It could be within your family. I've entered dialogue with some who would like to propose that Christianity has been created and hell created so that we could control the people. I'm like, are you serious? Are you saying that when Jesus said and spoke about hell that he was lying? Or that the church was lying when they wrote the scriptures? You have to say that in order to actually make such a statement. When you have to defend such ridiculous claims, Viva Cristo Rey, you give God the glory because you are then supporting what God came to proclaim. Jesus Christ died on a cross so that our sins could be forgiven, so that we could, when we die, rise to new life. He opened the doors for those who believe. The earliest church saints were all martyrs. So when we start thinking about, oh man, it's so tough today. No, it's just different. We might even have it better. We have the benefit of the testimony of 2 millennia of martyrs, where the first martyrs didn't, where these individuals in Maccabees didn't. And we have their stories of which we can tell, which they didn't. Oppressive regimes will continue. And as Christians, we will continually be oppressed. I think we need to recognize that and ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to defend that? And when thinking about it, what's our motivation? Is it one of love? Or is it just attacking? Because then we're no better than the oppressors. How do we evangelize? What is this thing called the new evangelization that Pope John Paul spoke so eloquently about? Well, we're called to share the gospel, not change the gospel, but share it in a way that is compelling. One thing that we speak about often is we want to teach the faith. But what happens if they don't care about the faith? See, what has to happen first is someone needs to catch the faith before we teach the faith. They have to have an experience. Talk to the millennials. If they haven't had the experience, it doesn't exist. Come to my generation, X generation, baby boomers, the great generation. As the further you go into the age groups, the older you go, the more they're likely willing to listen to that which came before. When I teach to our teens about things, the scriptures, it's hard to convince that the scriptures are even authoritative because they happened so far and so long ago. The culture, and even us, when we hear them, there's so many things that's in those scriptures that is hard to grasp because we don't have the education to understand it fully. But don't let that be a deterrent. Keep reading, and as you read, you'll come to understand. But this is where we need to pray. We need to be people who are joy-filled. Like, come join our faith. Come to Mass with me. As opposed to, come to Mass. It's really, it's 8:30. I'll even reserve you a spot. That, it doesn't have to be hard. But we have to have it first. There's a Latin idiom, but in English is basically, you can't give what you don't have. And so this is a time, I think, for me at least, for a gut check. What do I believe? Do I really believe in life after death or not? Because if I do believe this, if I do believe what Jesus had preached and gave his life for, I wonder what I should be doing different. I wonder how some of my fixations on this world are actually idolatry. Because this is not all there is. Everything here is transitory. I was speaking to some people, as you know, we're trying to build a new church over at St. Anne. Some interesting comments. Well, we're trying to honor the past while we build for the future. And some are insulted by the fact that we're building because they don't feel it's honoring the past. I'm like, because we're building a building, I'm not honoring the past? Like that building should stand forever? Well, newsflash, even the building we are about to build will not stand for 500 years. It will likely have to be rebuilt again because it just will not withstand, nature. But this is the thing. Why would we do even any of that? It's for the salvation of souls. It's for the resurrection, for life after death. So, have you recently had to stand up heroically for your faith? Where have you given of yourself for the good of others? Where in your life have you submitted yourself, not to your own desire, but for something that God was calling you to do? Where were you asked in your heart of hearts to do something difficult for the glory of God? When did your faith recently cause you pain? When was there a cost to what you believe? Were you actually tempted to renounce your faith? Did you stand up for your faith? Be mindful that while most of us will not have our throats slit or our heads cut off or our feet lacerated and shot, we all have a moment or moments that we're called to be martyrs. I pray that I will, in my time, and I pray for you in your time, that we will be strong witnesses. The word martyr, by the way, means witness to the reality of life after death. I wrote in my advance directive, I didn't put much in it. I just said, I give all the commands and all the decisions to my healthcare advocate, and I believe in the resurrection of the dead. And I give that over to my sister, in this case, to make decisions in light of that. I've seen many times people say, do whatever you can no matter what. I'm like, whoa. What about this life after death thing? Let us be mindful that there is life after death. And God is there to walk us through it. Jesus himself passed through death to conquer death. And brothers and sisters, that is the good news.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast. If you would like to connect with me or ask a question or you have some comment, you can always go to my website, fatherbill.org, FRBILL.org, and you can see my social media connections, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever that might be. Or if you want, you can send me a question or thought directly from the website and it'll be emailed to me. And I promise I'll connect right back to you. And until next time, may God bless you and have a great week. Bye-bye.